The city opened its eyes to the heartbeat of finance, a rhythm calmed by hot coffee. Swiss watches and leather shoes whispering money across cold marble floors. At the center of the financial district, the Dalton Wells Corp building stood like an untouchable symbol, glass covered from base to peak, mirror finished, to reflect ambition. From the outside, one could guess what was being said inside. It summed up a man. That man did not step out of a limo. There were no issues or assistants. No receptionist greeted him. No one called his name. Andre Sullivan, 38 years old, the newly assigned executive director of the corporation, chose to approach his building like a stranger. He wore a plain grey hoodie, old jeans, a backpack with frayed straps, and a pair of glasses worn with a calm so cool it bordered on cold. On the outside, he looked like an ordinary man, but inside, he was the new owner of a billion-dollar investment empire. Yet Andre didn't come to claim power. He came to observe, to see what no report ever captured, how people truly treated each other when they didn't know who was watching, especially how they treated those who looked different. For nearly a month, Andre had quietly listened to whispers inside the company that this workplace favored white people, that opportunities for advancement only opened for the right kind, and that the real signs weren't in public statements, but in glances in hallway distances, in meetings no one else was invited to. There was no proof. But Andre didn't need proof. He required truth. And to uncover the truth, he had to change location. He asked HR to assign him an unnamed position, temporary janitor, on the morning shift for 3 weeks. A new file was created. His personal information is kept confidential. No one knew, no one suspected. And so when Andre stepped into the building's main lobby this morning, the brightness hitting his eyes didn't come from chandeliers or glass walls, but from the light of stairs. Analyzed light. Invisible but undeniable. 2 receptionists glanced briefly at him, then looked down and resumed chatting. A few office workers entering the building leaned away slightly, as if he might be carrying something unpleasant. The only person who walked up was a man, Dylan Price, head of operations, walking with authority, exuding the confidence of someone used to command. Dylan looked Andre up and down, his eyes devoid of any courtesy. "Deliveries go around." "Back," he said, curtly, restrained, as if he had already classified the man in front of him with a single blink. Andre stood still for a beat. No reply, no explanation, just a quiet smile. And in his mind, he made a mark. This is it. This is precisely why I came here. To someone else, those words might have been forgotten in seconds. But to Andre, a man tasked with rebuilding the culture of an empire, it was the first warning sign of a system cracking from within. And today he didn't come to speak. He came to listen to unconscious whispers. He didn't come to be welcomed. He came to find out who was truly worth keeping in this building. And if Dylan Price or anyone else here had known who he was, maybe they would have offered him coffee, opened doors, and smiled like sunshine. But they didn't know, and that was the golden opportunity to uncover the truth. Andre didn't respond to Dylan. He nodded slightly like a stranger accepting orders from someone in power. And that's precisely what Dylan Price believed, that he held authority. The authority to classify people based solely on a glance, and the right to assign social rank based on clothes, skin color, and posture. To Dylan, Andre was just someone with the wrong shade showing up. And at Dalton Wells, appearances meant everything. Andre walked into reception, where 2 young employees laughed at a screen. One looked up, eyes sharp, like a blade slicing across his face. "What do you need?" she asked, voice just polite enough not to be considered rude. "I heard the company is hiring additional cleaning staff. I'm here to apply." A short silence followed. The girl raised an eyebrow, trying to suppress a smile. She turned to her coworker, whispered something, then began typing into the internal system. Her fingers moved quickly, but her eyes never left him, as if wondering why this man walked in with such confidence. After a few seconds, she looked back. There's only one position left: cleaning the upper floor office area. Morning shift, 6 days a week. No hazard, no long-term contract. Sounds good, Andre replied briefly. You sure? She raised her brow again. I need a job, he said calmly, as if she were being interviewed. A shrug, one last look. And then she handed him a name badge, Andrew S., temporary staff. Andre took the badge and clipped it on straight. On paper, he was now just a nameless figure within a billion-dollar machine. But this wasn't a demotion to himself. It was a calculated step back so that he could move forward through truth. As he stepped away, Dylan stood not far off, arms crossed, observing. His eyes stopped on the name tag, then he chuckled softly. Finally, found the right spot for you. Andre stayed calm, didn't respond. Faint chuckles behind him echoed like background noise, squeezing into a quiet room, small but full of mockery. And so he began. Not with a keynote address, not with strategic decisions or board meetings, but with a janitor's dark green uniform, a mop and highlighted rubber gloves. No one knew, no one suspected. They only saw another mirrored face in a role they'd never bothered to remember. The sanitation supervisor, Karen Blake, met him on the maintenance floor for the first time. Tall blonde hair, pulled tight, an expression that always seemed to be catching someone doing something wrong. She carried a clipboard used by supervisors to inspect cleanliness. You're the new guy. No attempt to hide her tone. Yes, starting today. Do your job, be on time. I don't like repeating myself. And don't get lazy. Andre nodded. In that exchange, he saw it clearly. She wasn't talking to a person, she was speaking to a stereotype she already had in her head. A man of color working as a janitor needed to be tightly managed and controlled, as if his very existence was already a problem. He started his first shift like a shadow, quiet, calm, but watching everything. Dalton and Wells glowed under ceiling lights, but beneath that glow were fine cracks of bias, of blinded eyes and quiet laughs pretending to be harmless. No one knew the man scrubbing their floors would soon be sitting above them, and Andre had no intention of revealing it yet. He needed time. He needed observation. He needed to see with his own eyes how a company praised as diverse and inclusive actually operated, when they thought no one was watching. And when the first day ended, Andre gave the mop one final pass, then looked at the area he'd just cleaned. The floor gleamed, but what he saw were smudges in the culture, a system that believed itself complete, but was in truth just a mask held together by thin smiles. The first day had ended, but the power game, the real one, had only just begun. The morning shift began at 6 a.m. before most employees woke up. Andre arrived earlier than the building opener turned on the hallway lights and prepped the soap and tools. Not because he was told to, but because he was a man of discipline. But to people like Karen Blake, hard work wasn't something admirable, especially when it came from someone she had already boxed into old frameworks. No need to act too diligent this early, she said, on the second morning, voice sharp like a box cutter. People like you usually don't keep it up for more than a few days. Andre didn't ask people like me. He knew she didn't need to define it. She only needed to press that phrase hard enough to make it a label and stamp it onto him daily. And that's what working at Dalton and Wells became for Andre, not just mopping floors, but enduring. Enduring the dismissive glances from office staff walking past without greeting him, even avoiding stepping near him, as if he were some unsightly stain in a place that was supposed to be clean and upscale. enduring the tiny laughs behind his back, the whispers soft enough not to get caught, but loud enough to make him feel unwelcome. Dylan Price was subtler. He didn't yell at Andre, didn't bark crude orders. He just exerted his dominance with the finesse of an educated racist. One day, Andre had just finished mopping the 12th floor hallway when Dylan emerged with a steaming cup of coffee from the elevator. He paused, looked down, so clean. Then suddenly, he tilted the cup, letting coffee spill directly onto the floor. Without even glancing at Andre, he walked off like nothing had happened. Andre said nothing. He just stared at the coffee stain spreading on the tiles like a message from upstairs. Clean this up because you're the one meant to, and you don't get to complain. But what weighed heavier on Andre wasn't that act itself. It was the eyes of the others, the ones who saw but said nothing. The ones told to keep walking. The ones selected to stay silent. A young woman from the legal department stepped out of the elevator just as the coffee hit the ground, caught Andre's eyes, gave a faint smile, nodded, then moved on. Not because she agreed. Maybe she was afraid. Or worse, perhaps she was used to it. Sometimes tensions repeat so long they become a rhythm. No one names it anymore because everyone thinks it's not their problem. By the second week, Karen began openly criticizing Andre in the hallway. "You call that clean?" She pointed at an imaginary dust spot on an already spotless floor. "You think you're in a ghetto?" The words burst out like reflex, but Andre knew they weren't accidental. A young employee passed by, paused for a few seconds, looked at both of them, then continued walking. No one said anything. No one could. Andre kept mopping silently and didn't respond. But in his mind, names and faces were being recorded. This was no longer an experiment. This was living evidence. One afternoon, Andre was assigned to clean up in the executive lounge. As he bent down to collect a bin, Karen appeared with a group of employees. She stopped at the doorway, speaking loudly, as if addressing the group, but her eyes fixed on him. "I don't understand why they let unprofessional types wander into this area." One staff member chuckled. Another exchanged a look. Andre stood up and stared directly into her eyes. No fear, no reaction. One silent question in his gaze. "If I were wearing a suit and had a different skin tone, would you say the same thing?" Karen looked away first, but Andre wouldn't forget. That afternoon, he stopped on the 8th floor, standing silently before the window overlooking the city. The buildings shimmered in the sunlight. Cars sped by like time itself had no reason to pause. But inside this tower, Andre's time was accumulating. Every tense second was a brick. Every gaze is a pillar. He was quietly building a truth not with microphones or amplification, just with timing. He was more certain that Dalton Wells wouldn't collapse because of a few bad individuals. It was decaying precisely the way the entire system had been trained to. Day 14 of Andre Sullivan's role as a gatekeeper began like every other in silence, with a glass of water and a pair of rubber gloves not yet dry. The halls of Dalton Wells gleamed like they had no faults, polished, quiet, indifferent. But Andre knew beneath those marble tiles was a culture cracking slowly, a place where racism didn't scream, it whispered, constantly. And today it would no longer whisper. Andre had just finished mopping the executive conference room, the private boardroom. He cleaned it twice, though it was already spotless, the table shining. Because he knew Karen Blake would inspect it today. And like always, she would find a flaw, even when there was none. At exactly 9:17 a.m., Karen arrived. She wasn't alone. 2 mid-level managers accompanied her, showing a potential client around the facility. A polite smile was on her face, but the moment her eyes landed on Andre, the smile froze. "All done, are we?" she said, not waiting for a reply. Then she entered the room, glancing over the display table as if inspecting something under a microscope. "This is what you call clean," her voice loud, cutting. Andre stood still, not reacting. "Are you blind?" Karen nearly hissed. He looked at her eyes, steady, unflinching. "I just wiped that table less than 5 minutes ago." His voice was calm, but echoed in a room slowly filling up. She gave a dry laugh, strolled toward the table like setting up for a scene. And then Karen took her hot coffee cup, gave no warning, didn't change expression, and slammed it down onto the glass. The coffee spilled everywhere, dripping onto the floor like a crime scene from a black and white film. Silence didn't even have time to arrive. The two managers froze. A young intern walking into the hallway stopped at the threshold, clipboard in hand, mouth agape. Someone in the room whispered, "What the hell just happened?" But Karen stood firm, arms folded, eyes sharp as a blade. "Now clean it again. This time try to do it properly." Andre didn't move, didn't reach for the rag, didn't flinch. He just stood there silent, as if giving the entire room time to digest the absurdity unfolding before them. He wasn't surprised anymore. He was affirmed. Affirmed that this system wasn't just flawed. It was running on destruction, normalized as routine. He looked around the room. Someone turned away. Someone pretended to check their phone. Someone smirked, but no one said a word. Not a single one. Karen still stood there, gaze confident in its cruelty. Maybe she was thinking, "What are you going to do? Who do you think you are? Just grab the mop and shut up." But Andre didn't grab the mop. He calmly removed his gloves, set them on the table's edge, and looked her straight in the eye. And smiled a small smile, not loud, not shaken, but not one of submission. Outside the boardroom, the hallway lights still glowed, and employees passed by. But inside that room, all boundaries had just been shattered. Because Andre had faced it head-on, Karen couldn't act anymore, and there were no dramatic outbursts. No overreaction, but that gaze that looked said, "I've seen enough. And you just signed your indictment." Today, Andre filed no report. He didn't call security, didn't speak to HR. He left the boardroom like nothing had happened. But inside, he knew that was when she dug her grave. And from now on, every action Karen Blake took would no longer be a personal failure. It would become evidence because the game had changed. Karen thought she had humiliated a janitor, but she didn't know. She had just spilled coffee on the man who would have the power to fire her. That morning, an unexpected call reached the front desk. A deep, calm voice. "This is Raymond Sullivan. I will arrive at headquarters in 45 minutes. Please keep it confidential and prepare to receive a guest." The receptionist nearly dropped the phone. Raymond Sullivan, the founder, former CEO and current board chairman of Dalton Wells Corp., rarely visited the headquarters. Every time he did it meant big news. And this time, no one knew the reason. The news spread within 10 minutes. Department heads started adjusting schedules. Internal communications managers began preparing silent alerts. The former CEO's secretary, still functioning as executive coordinator, checked and rechecked the schedule to ensure the boss could pass through every corridor without interruption. Within half an hour, unspoken disruption spread throughout the building. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew something was being prepared, something important, and very different. And it was true because the only person who wasn't told anything was the man still in a janitor's uniform. Andre Sullivan was present as always, still in his deep blue uniform, mop in hand, eyes scanning the hallways like he had no care about the whirlwind rising within the walls of his own company. But he knew, and he also knew today, the masks would begin to fall. At 9:55 a.m., the large glass doors of the main lobby swung open. Raymond Sullivan walked in. Tall silver hair, neatly combed back, his ash-grey suit, tailored to the last stitch, no introduction needed. No nameplate was required. He was the man everyone knew, but rarely looked at for long. Behind him were two senior aides, a seasoned financial director, and two men in black suits. No one knew why he came, but his presence felt like a quiet storm, unloud but bound to leave an impact. Dylan Price was the first to approach. He adjusted his tie, stood tall, and a calculated smile spread. Mr. Sullivan Dylan extended his hand. "An honor to see you again. If I had known you were coming, you didn't need to know." Raymond cut in his tone, calm but absolute. "You only need to stand where you're supposed to." Dylan froze for half a second, then nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." Karen Blake stood further back, but close enough to take in the scene. Her face changed instantly, her eyes tightened, and her hand smoothed her blouse. A few female employees from the admin stood straighter, eyes filled with anticipation. Everyone assumed Raymond had come to announce a new CEO, someone to replace the interim executive who had filled in for the past 3 months. And everyone imagined the same type of man, white, tall, Ivy League educated, eloquent and non-disruptive. No one, absolutely no one, thought the man who had just cleaned the executive boardroom table was that person. Standing at the far end of the hallway, just meters from Raymond, Andre still held his janitor's roll gloves on. The mop is leaning against the wall. His eyes quietly observed his father, not with joy, but with readiness. They didn't greet. No signal passed between them, no password required. Because they had agreed from the beginning, only when the time was right. Raymond walked toward the center of the lobby where all staff had gathered. He stood tall, looked around, and gently raised a hand. A hush fell over the space. Today, he began, his voice calm and steady, "is a very special day for this company." Glances exchanged. Dylan nodded, as if expecting a strategy announcement. Karen exhaled softly, preparing her next smile. Raymond continued, "Dalton and Wells has come a long way. We've grown, we've overcome crises, we've built a brand. But the most important thing I've come back for is not profit. It's culture, and that legacy must begin with integrity." Some in the crowd shifted quietly. The word integrity reflected their past choices like a mirror. Raymond lowered his voice, but it became clearer. "I want everyone here to know the company's new CEO has already been among you for quite some time, but none of you recognized him because he chose to observe in silence, to listen quietly, to feel firsthand whether this company where I once placed my trust is still worthy of continuing." Eyes began to move. Some managers whispered, "Is it Logan Kyle from finance?" Karen looked toward the marketing team. Dylan straightened, glancing around. No one considered the man standing beside a mop. Raymond smiled for the first time since entering. "I'm proud to say the new CEO of Dalton Wells is the one person none of you expected. He chose the most humble role to test and uncover the true values of each person here." He turned, eyes landing on Andre. "Andre, would you step forward?" In that second, no one breathed. Phones buzzed or footsteps echoed. Only the sound of masks quietly falling. Andre removed his gloves. I placed the mop back in its holder and stepped forward one step at a time, steady and calm, eyes meeting every gaze. Still dressed in work clothes, still carrying the posture of a man once dismissed. But now every silence turned toward him, not with judgment, but with the realization of an irreversible mistake. When Raymond Sullivan called his son's name in the grand lobby, each step Andre took engraved a silent line into the marble floor. "I was always here, and you didn't see me." He didn't change clothes, didn't ditch his uniform. I still wore the dark blue shirt and the sweatshirt was fresh. But no one mistook him anymore, not because Raymond had confirmed it, but because the fabric of the man's stride, his eyes, was not that of a janitor. People began turning. A few young staff members gasped behind their hands. A document slipped from someone's grasp. Karen Blake blinked rapidly, her face paling by the second. Dylan Price stood frozen, his forced smile petrified mid-expression. Andre stepped beside his father. Raymond placed a hand on his shoulder, a light touch but a sacred affirmation, long overdue. In the heavy silence, Andre turned to face the crowd. He didn't need to say much. His presence in janitor's clothes, before hundreds of employees as CEO, was already the loudest statement. "Good morning," he began, voice warm and steady, not loud, but reaching every ear. "My name is Andre Sullivan, son of Raymond Sullivan, and as of today, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Dalton Wells Corp." A wave of whispers spread like cracking ice. Some tried to hide their reactions. Some couldn't meet the eyes of the man they once dismissed for not mopping well enough. But Andre didn't look away. He looked at every face, especially the ones who had mocked, belittled, and ordered him to re-clean an already spotless table because his skin wasn't light enough. His eyes paused on Dylan. The man stood stiff, lips pressed, but failing to stay shut. Andre didn't speak immediately. He let the moment settle, then turned to Karen. Her face was flushed, as if slapped, yet she struggled to stay upright. Still, her eyes betrayed the fear, spreading through her like spilled ink. "I know," Andre continued, voice even like reading a slow, deliberate memo. "Many of you wonder why I chose to appear like this." He let the question linger. "I didn't choose to be a janitor to play a game of disguise. I did it to see how this company treats others. When it thinks no one is watching, some look down, others turned away. But Andre remained still calm and unwavering. I mopped floors and was still called lazy. I had coffee thrown in my face and no one reacted. I learned how some people treated me not because I was wrong, but because I didn't look like them." He paused, looked directly at Dylan. Their eyes locked, but only one held control. "Mr. Dylan Price," Andre said slowly, "do you remember my first day when you told me to go around back because I looked like a delivery guy, or when you spilled coffee in the 12th floor hallway? So I'd have to clean it again?" Dylan stammered, lips tightened. "I didn't know." "Exactly," Andre nodded. "And that's the problem. You didn't know who I was, so you thought it was okay to treat me like someone beneath you." The room was still. No one moved. No one defended. Andre turned to Karen. "And you, Karen Blake, the one who publicly humiliated me by throwing coffee on a display table and demanding I clean it up. The one who said I didn't belong here. The one who turned a small position of authority into a weapon without thinking of the consequences." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. The confidence she once wore like armor now weighed her down. Andre didn't shout. He let them see themselves. And the glances from colleagues, the ones who once followed, now began to shift. "I don't say this out of revenge," Andre continued. "I say it because it's true, and if this company wants to move into a new era, we must face that truth." He looked around. "And we must begin with those who believe they can never be replaced." At that moment, no one remembered he once held a mop. They saw a man stepping out of the shadows with a quiet power, having not just a title, but the authority to decide who stays and who goes. No tool in the Dalton Wells lobby could cut the air heavier than that. After Andre Sullivan's irreversible statement, no one spoke. Not a whisper, not a phone buzzed. Just silence, the kind that lingers when people realize their careers, reputations, and social standing are now being weighed by someone they never looked in the eye. Andre took a step closer to Dylan and Karen. They were no longer executives. They were two people whose roles had just been stripped before the company. He looked at Dylan for the first time. Mr. Price Andre's voice didn't change. Not angry, not shaking. Just clear like reading an ethics code aloud. On my first day, without asking my name, without seeing my file, you told me to go around back. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't consider that I might be a candidate. You just saw my skin and judged. Dylan tried to compose. Half a conciliatory smile rose, but fear swallowed it. Andre continued. You weren't acting distracted. You were intentional. You spilled coffee once after I finished cleaning, not because you were careless, but because you thought I was supposed to clean it. And worst of all, you did it before others, hoping they'd follow your example. Dylan went still. His cheeks started to tremble. Andre turned to Karen. And you, Ms. Blake. He didn't call her supervisor, manager, or mom. Just a bare name in a room once full of hierarchy, but now stripped to its roots. You thought I was just a janitor. You thought that because your title was bigger, your skin lighter, your time here longer, you had the right to humiliate me. You threw coffee at me. You ordered me to clean it in front of everyone. Karen opened her mouth, but Andre stopped her with a look. He stepped slowly in a circle, sweeping through the now quiet crowd. And the rest of you? How many of you saw it? How many witnessed me being insulted, bossed around, called one of those people, and still chose silence? Some lowered their heads, some clenched their fists. But Andre didn't stop. Silence is complicity, and here the greatest danger wasn't a few bad people, but many good people never spoke up. Raymond Sullivan stood behind him, his gaze no longer cold but proud, perhaps for the first time witnessing his son not just lead, but lead with conviction. Andre turned to him. Father, he said gently, I welcome your guidance, but I request your permission to decide. Raymond nodded silently and stepped back. Andre faced the room, inhaled deeply, and spoke to everyone, but his eyes remained locked on Dylan and Karen. I don't believe in humiliating others for revenge. I don't think punishing people makes a company better. But I believe this: no one should be allowed to keep power if they've used it to degrade others. The room was silent. Therefore, Andre said, his voice not raised yet louder than any speaker in the building, Dylan Price, your employment is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Dylan didn't speak. His face froze. His hands remained stiff at his sides. And when Andre continued, Karen Blake, you are dismissed immediately and are no longer allowed on company premises. Karen nearly collapsed. She had to pause as if something inside her had gone rigid. This is not punishment, Andre said. This is a lesson. He turned to the staff. And this lesson isn't just for them. It's for everyone who believed a job title gave them the right to look down on others. Then he paused, not because he lacked words, but because he knew. Silence now meant awareness. A young employee in the back row gently nodded. Another one who had seen Dylan spill coffee touched their face as if trying to cover shame. Finally, Andre spoke again, softly but firmly. Not everyone who holds power deserves it. And from today on, Dalton Wells will have no room for people like that. The shockwave from Andre's 2 firings didn't end there. It didn't just shatter the glass shielding silent injustices. It shook the foundation of the old belief that silence was safe. But Andre hadn't come only to expose. He came to rebuild. And that started with those who once stood on the other side of silence, the ones who chose not to turn away. He scanned the large room, not to seek out threats, but to find something rarer, quiet courage among the overlooked. Before we end this morning, Andre said, his voice now gentler yet still firm, I want to mention someone. He paused briefly. His eyes landed near the emergency stairwell where a young woman stood slightly withdrawn, clutching a clipboard, her face pale with anxiety. But when Andre's gaze touched her, the fear shifted into surprise, then tears. Andre smiled. "Maya Ellis," he said clearly. "I'm not sure how many people here even remember her name, but I do." The entire hall turned. Maya, a clerk from the admin department, is not a manager, has no title and has no backing. She didn't speak much and had no direct interaction with Andre during his time as a janitor. Except once after Karen had humiliated him in the hallway, she was the only one who walked up to him afterward and said softly, "I'm sorry. No one should be treated that way." Just one sentence, no performance, no platform, but enough for Andre to remember her face 3 weeks later. Maya didn't need power to do the right thing, Andre said. She just needed a conscience. And she used it not to call out or elevate, but to let me know that I wasn't invisible. Maya couldn't hold back her tears. They weren't out of emotion, but because someone noticed. Andre turned to his father. "As my first executive decision, he said I'd like to appoint Maya Ellis as Assistant Director of Corporate Culture. Effective immediately." Another wave passed through the room, but this time no one objected. Because no one could. The recognition, unexpected as it was entirely deserved. And that made it more potent than any formal ceremony the company had ever held. Maya stepped forward, eyes still red, hands still trembling. But the smile was genuine. It wasn't about the promotion. It was because she knew kindness hadn't been forgotten. Andre looked around again, not with judgment, but with the gaze of someone laying a new foundation. "I believe in discipline, but I believe even more in giving opportunities to those who deserve it. If this company wants to move forward, we needn't just remove the bad, we must nurture the good." He walked back to the center of the room, standing on the small platform that had never been used for a staff meeting. "I want everyone to understand this," he said. "Every action, no matter how small, is seen. Even if you think no one is watching, even if you think you're just a quiet person." He paused, then ended with a line that sent chills down more than a few spines. "Because starting today, I am watching." After Maya stepped away amidst scattered but emotional applause, Andre stepped to the center of the grand lobby, a space once designed for product showcases, now transformed into the company's most silent courtroom of justice. He didn't stand above anyone, but in that moment no one looked down on him again. "I didn't come here to present a report," Andre began, his voice low, steady, not angry, but heavy as a stone dropped on still water. "I came to listen, to understand, and to prove one thing: a company's culture isn't in the PowerPoint slides, it's in how you treat people when you don't think you need to." A cold breeze passed through the room. I swept floors, wiped tables, emptied trash, and cleaned restrooms. Not because I lacked leadership skills, but because I needed to know whether my team was worthy of being led. Some murmured. A few eyes began to glisten. What I found wasn't the failure of a few. It was the quiet erosion of respect. I was called names, ordered around like a floor mop, and worst of all, treated as if I didn't exist. He turned eyes, sweeping every group, every pair of eyes, now still avoiding contact. But Andre didn't shout. He spoke like someone who understood that the downfall of a culture doesn't start with evil acts. It begins with indifference. "Respect," he repeated, letting it hang in the air. "It isn't a reward for success. It isn't a gift reserved for the powerful. Respect is the starting point, not the destination." Some no longer looked down. They began truly listening. From today, Andre said Dalton Wells won't just be a place for quarterly goals and performance metrics. We will talk about people, about treatment, and about what it means to be worthy of working here. He looked at the leadership, then at the HR team. We will establish a cultural and ethical oversight council, not to supervise staff, but to hold accountable those we call leaders. From executives to janitorial leads, everyone will be measured by the same standard values, not appearance. Andre took a slow breath, then delivered the following line like a branding iron on air. If you can't treat someone with decency when you don't need anything from them, you don't deserve any authority here. A few deep exhales sounded. A finance manager wiped his brow. Someone looked at their colleague as if seeing them with new eyes. We can't change the past, Andre continued, but we can choose not to move forward in lies. Because if we don't, the company my father built, the brand you claim to be proud of, will be a shell for an empty system. And I refuse to let that happen. A different kind of silence spread across the room. Not fear, not shocking, but the silence of people seeing themselves in the mirror and not recognizing what they'd become. Andre offered a small smile, not of victory, but of pain, and was finally touched. Lastly, I want to say one thing to all of you, he said, his voice softer, but clearer than ever. I don't need you to agree with me. I need you to remember no one is invisible if they're standing for what's right. A beat passed, then someone clapped gently, slowly, then another, and soon the room filled with quiet applause. No chants, no dramatics, just a collective breath that signaled they understood. The applause was like a soft tide brushing the shore, leaving behind not closure, but the beginning of something new, with a different heart. Raymond Sullivan stepped forward, standing beside his son. In over 40 years of business, he had spoken at hundreds of conferences, shaken thousands of hands, and convinced the most skeptical shareholders with cold logic. But today he didn't say much. He looked at Andre, then reached out not to lift him, but to hand over something he had carried too long: authority. Not just the right to decide, but the spirit that defines what authority means. Andre took his hand. The handshake wasn't firm like a deal, nor emotional like a movie ending. It was simply a nod between two men, one ready to pass it on, and one strong enough to receive it. Raymond turned to the crowd, his voice gentle but firm. As of today, Dalton Wells is officially under the leadership of Andre Sullivan. And I, as its founder, approve support and am proud of it. He stepped back. No further explanation needed, no proof required. In his eyes today, the company had a future. Andre stood there alone before the entire staff, from executives to operators. No longer in uniform, but unchanged in composure since the day he carried a mop. If anything had changed, it was the stillness of someone who had crossed the fire and remembered why he stepped into it. He spoke, no microphone needed. I'm not the person who will make this company great through revenue or mergers. I'm the one who will make it worthy of the trust of the people behind every keyboard, every mop, every blueprint. He looked across them all again, not to assert dominance, but to deliver a message. We don't need to be perfect, but we're not allowed to be indifferent. Culture doesn't begin in documentation. It begins with what you do when no one's watching. And now, I'm always watching. A small wave of gentle laughter rippled through, not amused but refreshed, mixed with respect. Then Andre did something no one expected. He turned to the janitorial team, the ones he had worked alongside, nameless, unseen, forgotten. He nodded toward them, a silent, full thank you. Tomorrow, he said, there will be no division between management and labor. Tomorrow, every performance review will begin with one question: how does this person treat others when they need nothing from them? He walked forward, passing through the crowd. No one stopped him. No one spoke, just silence for the first time in this journey, not heavy but filled with hope. A young employee once chuckled at Andre mopping and whispered to a colleague, "If I had known earlier, I might have acted differently." The other replied without turning, "Earlier or later, what matters is starting to act right now." As the glass doors closed behind Andre, the afternoon sun lit the lobby, casting its glow on the company's emblem. Dalton Wells was no longer the same place. The new CEO wasn't just a black man. He wasn't just a surprise appointment. He was a story of justice written in action, not memos. And that's how you rewrite history, not through sermons, but with the undeniable presence of one person standing tall when everyone else had looked away.